Hello and welcome, this is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm going to share some Classic Mouse Christmas cards using the new Classic Mouse Christmas collection from Spellbinders and Simple Stories. This is an expansion on the Classic Mouse collection that came out 2 months ago with the Steamboat Willie duo. So I'm going to be using that in this video as well as the Classic Mouse alphabet. There's two different dies in this collection. There's the Classic Mouse Embellishments, which has some Christmas hats or Santa hats, as well as some holly and stuff like that. And then there's the Classic Mouse Holiday Wreath. The DIY color deck card that I just showed is the color palette that I'm going to be using. Obviously, you could do a traditional color palette with this. It would work really, really well with Mickey and Minnie because they are traditionally in kind of primary colors. I chose to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to be using some Waterfall and Spruce for the teal colors, as well as Coral and Sicily for the peachy tones. I'm also using some glitter cardstock from the Antique White Treasured Cardstock pack. I like using this glitter pack the cardstock pack because they die cut so beautifully. They have 5 different finishes for the metallics at 3 different sheets each, so they go a long way. I'm also going to be using the pearl finish from that set, and it is kind of a pearly finish, but it has a little bit of a gold shimmer to it, which is absolutely gorgeous. So these pieces, while they look like there's a lot of pieces to them when you're doing the Steamboat Willie duo, they're really easy to put together. The hardest part really is doing all of the die cutting. Once everything is die cut, they come together really, really easily. I like to use some liquid glue, so I'm using some Barely Art glue. I have it in a fine line bottle, and it's going to work perfectly for all of the little die cuts assembly, as well as for putting my cards together. These pieces are just a little bit bigger. I typically do A2 cards, but because they're a little bit bigger and there's more that I want to put on these cards, I'm going to be doing 5x7 cards. The piece of cardstock that I have my die cuts on there is an A2 piece. So you can see that if you're just using those characters, that's totally fine, but I wanted to add a little bit more to each one of them. So the larger card size is going to work a little bit better. So as I'm putting the Steamboat Willie duo pieces together, I just kind of work my way from the top to the bottom. So I do the head first, and then I do the body, and then I add them together, add the arms, and then add the tail. Now this style has kind of a black outline on it. So when you're putting the layers on them, there's going to be the over layers are going to be a little bit smaller than the under layer to keep that black outline around it. I also have done the video when the first part of the collection came out, so I will link that at the end of this one if you want to see them done. Though that video was done in a little bit more traditional colors, a little bit more bright, vibrant primary colors. So you can see these guys done in those colors as well. So as I'm putting these together, you can see how easy they really are. Once you put each piece together, there's obviously less pieces to go. The liquid glue takes a few moments to dry or to start setting. So as I'm moving them around, some of the pieces haven't set yet, so they're coming off, but they're really easy to put back on. And then once I have everything on them, I will set them aside to completely dry. While I'm putting them on, I'm paying attention to what pieces are adhering to pieces underneath. So when I went to put that hat on, I only put glue on the pieces that were going to actually attach to the head. And then when it came to the scarf, I only put it on the knot. I didn't really want the hanging parts of the scarf to be glued down, but you absolutely could. Once I'm done that first one, I'm going to work on Minnie here, and the process is exactly the same. The parts are just slightly different for the body. So there is the base part of the head, there is the overlay, which is the white part, and then there's the tongue part, which goes underneath. I have that die cut out of Sicily Cardstock because I didn't want to introduce any more colors to this. I wanted to keep the color palette fairly simple. Then there is an eyelash for Minnie that goes right behind her head. Now, in that first video that I did, I attempted to put a second pair of eyelashes on the eye that's more or closer to the front. It looked awful. It did not work. So if you're going to try to do that, you can go watch my first video and see what the result was. It did not look as nice as I thought it was going to look, but that's okay. Sometimes we try these things and they work, and that's fantastic. And sometimes we try them and we realize that our ideas are not going to work at all, and you'll learn something there too. So then when it comes to the bottom, I put the skirt on first, or second, the shoes on as well, and then the little pantaloon pieces. Sometimes I'll put the glue right on the pieces that I'm gluing on, and sometimes I'll put the glue on the base part and then use my jewel picker to just pick up that die cut and then put it in the glue, especially for the really, really tiny pieces. One of the pantaloon pieces are super, super tiny, so it's much easier to put the glue on the outline on the die cut and then use my jewel picker to lift up that die cut and put it in place. So now that we have Minnie all ready to go and finished, we can start on our card background. I'm going to set these guys aside and let them dry totally. Look how adorable they are. And like I said, this is not a traditional color palette, obviously, and you can easily change that up, but they're just so fun. For Mickey lovers, they're a great way to create Christmas cards for them. For the background, I thought it would be fun if Mickey and Minnie were decorating a tree or decorating for Christmas. So I'm using the Twinkle Bright Tree Glimmer plate or press plate. I'm using it with my Glimmer system. I wanted to do just a simple foiled tree for the background. I'm going to just do a simple, very light ink blending. I want Mickey and Minnie to be the prominent features of this card, and I want the background just to kind of be a supporting added feature to it. So I'm just using some Prism cardstock. This is silver with a holographic shimmer to it, so it's going to tie in beautifully for the different colors there. I also used one of the sentiments that came with that plate. Anytime I do foiling, I always use my solid hot foil plate to solid hot foil the excess. I won't be using it in this card because that solid hot foil plate is not a 5x7 size. It's a little bit smaller. If I were to use it in this card, I would have to make my mats really, really small, and it's just not going to work. And you can actually see that I didn't let my plate sit for quite long enough, and it's not a perfect foiling. I'll just put it in my drawer with all my specialty cardstocks, and I'll typically use that for doing some die cutting out of the pretty pieces. So once I have my foiled piece done, and I foiled this on Hammermill Cardstock, I trim this down to 4.5 inches by 6.5 inches, keeping that tree in the center. And when I trimmed it down, I trimmed more off the top than the bottom. So there was a tiny little bit of oil over foiling in the bottom right corner. I just used a Tombow sand eraser just to remove that over foiling. I'm going to do a tiny little bit of ink blending around the edges, so that's going to be totally hidden, but the foil is gone because of that sand eraser. For my tree, I'm just using a detailed ink blending brush with Evergreen Bow Distress ink, doing just a little bit of light ink blending from the bottom of each layer of the tree and kind of flicking my brush up. I'm not coloring the entire thing. I wanted to add some of the color that I have used on Mickey and Minnie on that background, but I don't want it to compete with my die cuts. I want them to be the focal point. So I'm just adding a tiny little bit of color because I think the tree looks a little bit plain and bland without it, but not doing a ton of it because, again, I want the die cuts to be the focal point. So once I've done that evergreen bough, I took some saltwater taffy with another detailed blending brush, and I'm just coloring in the ornaments that are on that tree, just giving them a tiny little bit of color there. So with that done, I can do a little bit of ink blending around the outside of my piece here. I'm going to be using that same Evergreen Bow Distress Pad. I have my Pinkfresh brushes here. These are the 1-inch brushes. They're really nice for ink blending. Typically, I'll use my Spellbinders brushes for doing ink blending on my backgrounds. The only reason why I didn't was because the color on my green brush was a little bit more yellowy green, and this is a blue green, and I didn't want to have the wrong color ink blended on the side. The last time I used this brush was with this Evergreen Bow pad, so it's going to be true to the color. So I just did a little kiss of color around the outside edges. It's just to frame it in. And once again, I don't want to do too much because I don't want to overpower the die cuts on the front. For the mat for this card, I have a piece of Sicily Cardstock here. It is trimmed to 4 3/4 by 6 3/4 inches. So we have really thin mats around here, just framing everything in and tying all the colors together. Now, even though I'm doing a 5x7 card here, you can see that the tails and the hat tips are kind of going off of the outside edges of that card. I could squish them in, but they're going to be kind of too close to each other or in front of the tree. Another option here would have been to do that foiled tree on a horizontal card and have a little bit more space there. with the shape of the tree, I just like the idea of a vertical card, but that is an option if you wanted to have them all within, like the die cuts within the 5x7 size of the card. To add a little bit of silver to the start at the top of the tree, I just used a silver gel pen and just colored that in. And then one of the things that I love doing with Christmas things is put a little bit of extra texture on my pieces. So I'm using some glossy accents here just to fill in the ornaments on the tree, just to make them nice and glossy, as well as give them that domed look to them. And I also put it on the ornament that Mickey or Minnie is holding. Now for my second card, once again, I've got Mickey and Minnie here. I did assemble them off screen because the assembly is exactly the same as the first one, and I didn't want to do a lot of repetition in the video. So I have my wreath from the Classic Mouse Holiday Wreath die set. There's a lot of really great options in that set, so you can pick and choose and you can create a bunch of different types of wreaths. Now for my Classic Mouse alphabet, I have a J and a Y die cut out of blue spruce cardstock. It's going to coordinate with that wreath and it's going to spell the word joy. For my ornaments to go on my wreath, I have them die cut out of the Waterfall Cardstock for the shadow, the base part. And then the upper layer is die cut out of that pearl cardstock from the antique white cardstock pack. Now, you can watch me having fun with these die cuts. I must have had something on my fingers that I couldn't feel because I kept touching my fingers and feeling them. I couldn't feel anything. But for some reason, the die cuts kept wanting to stick to my fingers. So I was fighting with them just a little bit. Really, I probably should have just gone and washed my hands because even though I couldn't feel anything, there must be something there because those die cuts just really wanted to stick there. But I was fighting my way through it. So as I'm gluing these layers together, I'm putting them under my acrylic block. I use this block a lot for holding things flat while they're drying because it's clear. If something happens to move or shift while I'm putting it under there, I can see that and I can adjust it before the glue totally dries. But I use this a lot. It's a great way to just hold things flat, keep your hands free for working on other things. Once the ornaments were dry or had a few moments to set, I glued them on top of the wreath. Now I just pulled in that die set and there's a bunch of different options. You can change out the little berry things that I have on the inside of that wreath with, there's words, there's Merry Christmas and I think Happy Holidays. There's two different word die sets. There's also a huge bow that you can use, and actually there would have been space on this bow to add the bow because I ended up doing a horizontal card here instead of a vertical card, but I thought it was a little bit too big and too overpowering for the look that I was going for. So I opted not to use it for this particular card. For the background of this card, I'm using the Holiday Lights embossing folder. I used a piece of 5x7 Hammermill cardstock and then I trimmed it down to 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. And then I'm going to do the same ink blending around the edges like I did on the last card. Very, very light ink blending, and I'm doing it with the Saltwater Taffy Distress ink. For this particular card, I have a piece of blue spruce cardstock that I'm going to be using as my mat behind here. So I chose an ink color that was different than that. If I were to use the Evergreen Bough, I probably would have done Sicily or the Coral cardstock just so that the layers were a little bit different and you could see that ink blending and it didn't just kind of fade away. So I just did really, really light ink blending around the edges. Again, it's just to frame it. It's not to add a whole bunch of color. It's just to, frame it. So with all of those pieces done, I'm ready to start assembling my card. So I have my 5x7 card base here, the piece of blue spruce cardstock for my mat, and then I can glue down that embossed piece. And try not to drop it while you're adding the glue to it. I am quite liberal with the glue when it comes to embossed cardstock because there's some areas that are recessed and some that are not. I want to make sure that everything has good contact with the layer below. Before I start to add Mickey and Minnie to the card, I want to put the layers or the words, the letters in their hands. So I put a little bit of glue on their hands. The cool thing about the way this die cuts is the thumb or the space between the thumb and the fingers, there's a little slit there. So you can easily put things in their hands. Then I glue down the wreath in the center of the card and then glue down Mickey and Minnie with the letters in their hands. Now, as I'm putting them down, I'm realizing that these letters are getting lost with that wreath. You actually really can't see them. So what I'm going to go do is off screen, I'm going to die cut them with some Waterfall cardstock and add them on top of the letters that I have right there, just so that they're visible. There's nothing worse than doing a detail and having it not be visible. When you see the card in person, you can see that there's letters there, but you want to make it really obvious that they're holding letters. You don't want it to be too hidden. So I just glued those letters right on top of the ones that they were already holding. However, I did them a little bit offset so that they do look like they have a shadow to them. For a little bit of extra texture to these cards, I'm taking some glossy accents and putting them on those ornaments that are on the wreath. Now, I did those ornaments in that pearl cardstock, but you could also do it in one of the colors that you have for your color scheme. That would look fantastic as well. The piece that I put under the wreath was the coral cardstock, so it already has the berries that are in a different color. To give them a different texture, I'm just using a little bit of stickles in each one of those holes just to make them really sparkle. I'm also using that stickles on top of the J as well as the Y, just to give them a little bit of different texture from Mickey's clothes. I didn't want them to look like the same texture, so adding the stickles to it really does that. Then I let them completely dry, and I think it took about an hour for it to dry because I was quite generous with the stickles, especially on the letters. Here is the finished card. I absolutely love the way it looks, and I love that we have Mickey and Minnie to play around with. It looks great with the holiday lights in the background. It adds some texture to it, but because the texture isn't inked, it's really, really subtle. And then we have our first card where they're decorating the tree. Again, this is a vertical card, but you could easily change it into a horizontal card if you wanted to make sure that Mickey and Minnie could fit within that 5x7 size. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate all the time that you spend with me. Have a fantastic day.